Last month, I had the opportunity to travel, something that I didn't think would ever happen again. I haven't been out of the country as most people have for 18 months, and I got an opportunity through some work to go from London to Mexico, and I took it. This is my video explaining what the process was like, what the airport experience was like, and what the flight was like traveling out of a lockdown country during the pandemic internationally to Mexico. Here we go. We all know that traveling at the moment is a massive ball ache. It is so hard to get anywhere. Luckily, I don't know how, I still pinch myself that it happened, but I managed to get away last month for a bit of work. I flew on British Airways from London Gatwick to CANCUN, spent some time in Tulum, and then I went to Holbox, an island in the north, and then had to fly to Mexico City and then flew back from Mexico City to London. This is a bit of explanation and a bit of a run through about what it was like to fly from London during the pandemic. This was in May. I know things have slightly changed now, but Mexico was still on the amber list. So yeah, I want to kind of run you through basically, what it was like getting there and what the airport was like here in London, and then what the airport was like in Mexico. So as you guys know, most tickets with airlines at the moment are flexible, offering for you to change free of charge, should they cancel or should you need to cancel. Luckily I follow, if you don't follow, please follow the Points Guy UK, because I managed to fly with Avios air points collected on an American Express British Airways credit card, which Nikki Kelvin, who I will link to in this video from the Points Guy, has recommended. Anyone can get started doing it. It's really, really good and easy way to start collecting points and getting really heavily discounted, if not free, flights with British Airways. And it's ideal for long haul flights like this. So all in all, with a mixture of Avios that collected within 3 months of getting this flight, part Avios and part cash, I paid under £350 return with British Airways to Mexico. So yes, that's tip number one. The other thing that you will need to do before you fly is make sure whether you need to do a PCR test. So I was a bit of a idiot. I just assumed that every flight needed a PCR test. If you go to the gov.uk website and have a look on there, it will tell you which countries when you get to will need a PCR test. You don't need a PCR test necessarily to fly from Gatwick. I took one and spent about £150 on a last minute one here in the UK, which was an idiot thing to do because Mexico, at the time that I was flying, did not require a PCR test. So I could have saved myself 150 quid. The other thing that you will need to do before you fly is to check the rules on flying from London. At the time that I was flying in May, all international travel was essentially banned unless it was for essential reasons. I managed to fly because I had a letter from my employer who said that I needed to go to Mexico for work purposes. I was asked twice, one time by police as I was going into security, and another time by border force control as I was coming out of security and to my gate, what my reason for travel was. The first police officer, I just kind of looked him in the eye and said, I'm traveling for work purposes. He was like, that's absolutely fine, come on through. The second border control officer asked me for details, kind of what the nature of my work was, where the offices were based, what type of work I was pursuing. So there are enforcements in place, especially where I was at Gatwick. So I really recommend, if you are traveling internationally and you are traveling to a country that's not on the green list, or kind of if the rules in general for travel internationally say you travel for essential purposes, that you actually are going for an essential purpose. I got to Gatwick by train. The Gatwick train from where I was in East London pulls into, I think, the South Terminal. At that time, all British Airways flights, which usually go from that terminal, are actually now going from the North Terminal. So you have to take a shuttle when you get to the South Terminal over to North. The kind of signage and everything has changed over there at Gatwick. It was a little bit confusing. I was a bit lost, so it took a little bit longer than I expected. So please leave extra time. It is I mean, at this point, it was really necessary. Otherwise, I probably would have missed my flight. So yeah, if you are going internationally, please leave more time than you usually would. Once I was at the airport, check-in was, as you can imagine, empty. It was very, very clear. They did ask me that I didn't realise this before, I need a declaration of travel from the British government, which luckily you can do online. And if you are flying from the UK outbound, it's quite simple. You can fill in a form which takes about 5 minutes and you get sent a document via email. They said that Border Force would check that document because there's a specific QR code on that document. That was not actually checked during my experience at Gatwick, but the check-in insisted that I had it. It's free to do. It does take 5 minutes. It might save you a little bit of stress and a little bit of time if you do that at home before you fly. So, as I mentioned before, security was a little bit of a stress. As you said, first I was asked by quite a burly policeman before I got into security what the nature of my travel was, but he was, pretty decent. And the second border control after security was a bit more of an issue. Not an issue, but yeah, I mean, they are being very thorough and checking people. So there was that. But once I was past that and got into the lounge, I was one of obviously only a handful of people there. There was a mixture of people. There was obviously a couple of business people, a couple of students. I think there was the odd elderly person there, kind of clearly going for family or going back home. But I've never seen an airport so empty in my life. Shops were open. I want to say maybe about 70% of the shops were open in the airport. Restaurants and cafes wise, I think half of them were open. It was mainly kind of things like sandwiches from W.H. Smith, and then the Pret was open. Some of the other restaurants were closed. But as I said, these are always changing on a daily basis, so your experience might be different to mine. I didn't get a chance this trip to access any of the airport lounges. Hopefully I will be able to in the future because I'm a passionate traveller and I think that's a really exciting part of the travel experience, which I'm yet to do. But the airport staff at the shops and the restaurants that were open were really fantastic and were clearly excited to hopefully see travel open again, and were enthusiastic about doing their jobs and welcoming new people. So that was really nice to see, and I really commend the staff at London Gatwick and the BA staff for doing a cracking job as always. So now to the actual flight. I flew out on a Boeing 777. It was slightly older than the plane that I flew back in. You could kind of tell. I was also in economy, but and the food was okay. I'd say the food for that trip out was a 6 or a 7 out of 10. There wasn't a lot of choice. It was fairly basic, but it kind of did its job and got us through. The other thing about the flight that was a bit kind of unnerving was that before our flight took off, police actually came onto our flight and checked the log with the captain and the staff that everyone on that flight had a declaration to travel. We didn't personally have to show it, but it was just checked that everybody had that on the log, and that obviously we were all traveling for essential reasons. The other next interesting thing about the flight out, so London to Cancun is usually a very popular flight. My flight was actually quite busy, surprisingly. I want to say I was expecting it to be about 20 to 30% full. It was actually about 60% full, and a variety of travelers on that flight. But what was quite interesting was the captain on that flight did say, he asked us please to moderate and watch our drinking on that flight, because they had to reroute several flights over the past few weeks while mid-air through to America, because there were really disruptive and rude customers on the flight who were drinking too much and refused to stop drinking, and also kicked up a fuss when they were refused alcohol. Kind of out of the spirit, really, of the fact that we are very privileged to travel, and if you can travel at the moment, please be respectful of other passengers and the staff, because they are really trying to do their best kind of job. It was quite a long flight time. It was about 11 and a half hours. On this flight, there was a lot of turbulence. I was almost sick. I'm a very good flyer and I love flying, but for some reason on this flight, I had one gin and tonic and I was almost sick. It was going against the wind, and you're going out of London through to Mexico. So that was probably the reason why, but it was more than I was expecting, and it just didn't settle down with me particularly well. As I mentioned, the staff were fantastic. I lost my ring as I was leaving the plane, and I was worried about even kind of going to ask about anyone trying to help me retrieve it. And yet they searched the entire kind of, where I was sitting. They pulled up the seats and kind of checked all the toilets. So I really want to thank the staff anyway for trying to help me locate a ring, which unfortunately I lost. But oh well, you win some, you lose some in life. But and I could have lost something worse, but it was still very nice of the staff to try their hardest. Once I got to Mexico, it was a completely different story. That Mexico's open borders, well, it was when I was traveling, so please check before you travel. Open borders, requiring no PCR tests, no visas if you're just traveling for a short amount of time. The security immigration there was really busy. It was the busiest I expected any airport to be. It was heaving. I had to wait in a queue to get through immigration for about 45 minutes, which is a pretty decent time. A lot of holiday makers, a lot of Americans over there, a few Europeans as well, obviously, but they do take the mask situation very seriously over there. So masks were required the whole time you're in the queue and in the airport until you get out of the airport. We also have to talk about these, or as I learned in Mexico, they're called cubrebocas in Spanish. That might come in handy when you need to buy a new one when you're in Mexico. So the minute you are in the airport at check-in, you need to have your mask on. Keep it on at all times. On the flight, they had a safety video and a briefing saying that masks were mandatory to stay on the entire time of the flight. It was annoying for 11 and a half hours on a plane when there was no one sitting next to you, but that is what's required at the moment to stay safe, stay healthy, and allow these flights to happen so that some travel can happen. Obviously, on a flight, you are being fed, I hope, if it's a long flight, and watered. So they recommend, obviously, you take them off for your eating and your drinking. But that's the only times that masks were allowed to come off the face at all. All in all, I do want to say I felt incredibly safe and looked after from the minute I got to Gatwick to the minute I got off at Mexico. And if you are thinking of traveling but are kind of scared or worried at this moment, people are traveling and they are taking the precautions, and it's very kind of calming and reassuring to see all of these precautions being taken. So if you want to do it, go for it. If you can do it, go for it. Countries are opening back up. Airlines are keeping their standards and their hygienes incredibly high. On the flight I was with at British Airways, There were regular sprays that they were kind of using during the flight, and kind of disinfectants. Everybody got also given a little personal baggie of Dettol, hand wipes and gel, which was really, really helpful and handy as well as extra masks, obviously, as well. All in all, I was really happy with the experience, and I kind of knew from the outset, but I'm kind of very grateful that I got there in one piece and I got back in one piece. So please stay tuned. I'm going to also put together a kind of diary vlog of my time in Tulum, a guide to Holbox, and also to Mexico City. So please look out for those on my channel. Obviously, this is my first video, guys, and I really hope you like it, but also I'm going to be looking at creating more content. So if you want to see more, please have a thumbs up and subscribe. I'm going to put some links to some of the things I mentioned in this video below. If you have any comments, please let me know. To all those kind of thinking out there to do it, safe travels, happy travels, stay safe, and see you on the other side.